Hey everyone, and welcome to Cooking Companion TV. I'm Jenna Edwards, and this is a recipe demo of Paul Hollywood's lattice cherry pie from Great British Bake Off. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and let's get right to it. I really enjoy this recipe because the pie crust is so easy. I've been able to make it twice without breaking the strips while doing the lattice. That's been my biggest fear about pie crust and lattice work. We start with 300 grams of plain flour sifted into a bowl and 175 grams of salted butter that's cubed and chilled. I generally keep a couple sticks of butter in the freezer for recipes like this and southern biscuits, and just to hide some extra from myself. So cube it and toss it in with the flour. Then use your fingertips to literally rub the butter into the flour. We're coating the flour with the fat, which keeps the gluten from developing when we mix it, and it creates a flaky texture. This will take a solid 5 minutes, if not a full 10 minutes, depending on your speed. Stop when it looks like sand or fine breadcrumbs. Then sift in confectioner's sugar, 40 grams, also known as powdered sugar or icing sugar, and stir it in. Whisk together 1 egg yolk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 3 tablespoons of ice cold water. The best way to do this is to put some water and ice in a small bowl to make it ice cold, and then measure out the tablespoons from that. Then drizzle this mixture into the flour mixture. You'll notice I'm using a table knife to cut the liquid mixture into the flour and butter. Again, we don't want any gluten development from the flour, so you'll want to use a table knife or a palette knife to combine it all. If you feel like it's dry, you can sprinkle in another tablespoon of ice water, but I didn't feel the need to do that. I left my dough in these large clumps because I can see that it's starting to stick to itself, which is the direction we're going anyway. And I know there aren't any dry spots or clumps, so I'll just knead it together without overworking it. Tip out the dough onto a lightly floured surface and knead until smooth. And this is a light kneading, nothing transformative. The heat from your hands will soften the butter even more. It took me 1.5 minutes, only 90 seconds, to get it smooth. Now divide the dough into 2 pieces as 1/3 and 2/3. The larger piece will be your bottom crust. The other one will be the lattice strips. Roll out the larger piece into a 25 centimeter diameter on the back of a lightly floured baking sheet. And I for sure measured to make sure I didn't use too much dough on this part and to short myself on the other piece. Also, I just don't have a concept for centimeters. I also wanted a near perfect circle, and this took about 2 minutes to roll out. And we'll set it in the fridge for 15 minutes to chill. And that's when we'll roll out the smaller piece of dough into a square about 20 centimeters. This wasn't as easy as the circle because it's not easy to get straight edges when rolling dough. It also needs to be on a lightly floured surface and will also chill in the fridge for 15 minutes. So let's make Paul's cherry pie filling. He calls for 600 grams of frozen cherries, which for me was 2 bags. You'll need to give them at least 2 hours to thaw and drain. And I recommend squeezing the cherries to get the extra juice out. Otherwise, you'll have a leaky pie. You don't have to mash them up with your hands or break them down, but I'd work to get more juice out than just what drips out from the thawing process. Sprinkle in 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and 75 grams of castor sugar. Castor sugar, for us Americans, is white sugar with a texture somewhere between regular granulated sugar and powdered sugar. You can buy it, or you can process your regular granulated sugar in a food processor until the granules are small but not yet powdery. Castor sugar is not the same volume as granulated sugar, meaning 1 cup of castor sugar is not the same as 1 cup of granulated sugar or 1 cup of powdered sugar. So you have to weigh it to get the proper measurement. I weighed out 75 grams of granulated sugar and then processed it into a finer grain before adding it to the cherries and cornstarch. And give it a good stir. Now measure in 200 grams of cherry jam and stir it into the cherry mix. Now 15 minutes have definitely passed, and we can pull out our bottom crust to form into a 20 centimeter tart pan with a removable bottom. I'll be honest, this is smaller than I expected. The dough will be stiff, so be gentle when forming it into the sides so it doesn't crack. I took my time pushing it in stages before getting it into the corners and eventually cutting off the extra dough. Add your filling and know that you may not use all of it. Mine is super liquidy because in this version, I didn't squeeze my cherries. The pie is super full and the filling is very thin and the heat will thin it out even more because that's what happens when you apply heat to jam or preserves or jelly. But I'm trying to trust the directions. It's probably why this was a technical challenge because you should know these things. You should also have 25 grams of salted butter cubed to dot on top of the filling, but I forgot to do that at this stage. Now it's time for the lattice. Pull out your other dough and measure out strips about 2 centimeters wide. You should end up with 10 strips in total. When you line up your strips to weave, try to put the longer ones in the middle since they have more pie to cover than the ones on the ends. And this demo is why I loved the dough. I could curl them over without breaking them, which made it easier to manage the weave. So the idea is that once you have the grid started, it should be fairly straightforward to lay down the strips under and over the opposite directions and inching each of those strips forward. If you're counting, that's right, I only have 8 strips and I got off rhythm in a couple of places, but overall, I'm pretty proud for my first ever latticed pie. And press down any extra strip hanging off the edge so you have a clean, neat edge. And here's where I added that extra butter on top of the filling. And I think, doing it at this point works too. So per the recipe, you're also supposed to brush the strips with egg white before weaving them. And definitely don't skip this part, even if you forget like me and brush on the egg whites once you've already woven them. It makes a beautiful browning. And one more finishing option is to sprinkle preserving sugar on top, which is larger granules than regular granulated sugar. So you've got like 3 types of sugar in this recipe. I opted to just sprinkle regular sugar on top, but the pie is sweet enough without it. It's just a nice texture to add. Now we'll bake at 220 degrees Celsius or 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes, then reduce the heat to 180 Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit for another 25 to 30 minutes. You should have a baking tray heating in the oven before you add the pie. So you're putting the pie on a preheated tray. Paul recommends adding foil to the pie if you see that the crust is getting too brown. Now at first, I didn't think I needed that, but now that I've had the pie a couple times, I think I should have. Once it's out of the oven, it needs to sit for several hours before cutting into it. Like overnight is best. And please heed my advice and wait. I was a real fatty and decided it was fine. 2 hours and it leaked everywhere. It looked horrible. Tasted fine. Speaking of, it will leak out of the pie and it will be a thick, sticky mess. Now I tried to release the pie pan from the leaked filling so it wouldn't cool into like the sugar cement and keep from me getting into the pie at all. So those are my recommendations for Paul Hollywood's lattice cherry pie. Make it, but take these other precautions. He includes a recipe for custard to like pour over it, but honestly, just make ice cream. That's it for this recipe demo of lattice cherry pie by Paul Hollywood. Get the ingredient list below or at cookingcompaniontv.com/cherry pie. It's also on the British Bake Off website, of course. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it and subscribe to this channel for more demos just like this. I'm Jenna Edwards and thanks for watching.